Welcome, everybody. I'm Kathy, Senior Associate Director of Career Development at Yale School of the Environment, and I am thrilled to be co-panel on circular economy careers with my good colleague, Jim Amsbacher, Associate Director in Career Counseling, Careers Common Good at Brown University's Center for Careers and Life After Brown. We're excited to be working together with colleagues from the league schools on the first virtual, the 18th annual All Ivy Environmental and Sustainable Development Career Fair. This is the second in a series of career panels hosted in advance of the fair, which takes place Friday from 10 to 1 p.m. Jim and I have had the privilege of working together on this event for 10 years with Columbia's Earth Institute and partner schools. In true small world fashion, we discovered very early on that one of his friends that he worked with on a college newspaper turns out to be an alumnus of Yale School of the Environment. So it kind of sealed our friendship right in the beginning there. So during our hour together today, we will hear from 4 professionals and esteemed alumni working to advance a circular economy. For quick context, I share this quote from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's website. What is a circular economy? Looking beyond the current take, make, waste, extractive, industrial model, circular economy aims to redefine growth, focusing on positive society benefit. It entails gradually decoupling economic activity from the consumption of finite resources and designing ways out of the system. Underpinned by a transition to renewable energy sources, the model builds economic, natural, and social capital. It is based on three principles. The first is design out waste and pollution. The second is to keep products and material in use. And the third is regenerate natural systems. And with that, I cede the floor to Tim, who is going to kick off our discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, Kathy, and thanks everybody for joining us. We can't see you all out there, but we know from past experience that the audience for these panel discussions has included first years, sophomores, and juniors looking for internships, seniors, master's students, and PhD candidates looking for first jobs, as well as alumni from from the partner schools. We know there are a wide range of academic disciplines that attendees are focusing on, from environmental studies to engineering to policy and more. And we're hoping that you're all going to hear some stuff you'll find interesting and useful for you in your search. We're going to start off by asking the panelists to introduce themselves and answer a 2-part introductory question. From there, we'll take questions from you. You can use the Q&A function to ask questions, and Kathy and I will share those. And you can take a moment right now to locate the Q&A box below this screen. I want to start by asking the panelists to introduce themselves, and let's start with Caitlin. And Caitlin, the question for you is to, again, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about quick timeline on your path and your current role. And then part 2, tell us how you define or expand upon circular economy vis-a-vis the definition quoted from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and how does your organization's work fit into that definition? So starting.
Great. So my name is Caitlin Chicklin. I graduated from Brandeis University with a degree in environmental studies in 2014, and then the Yale School of the Environment with an MEM in business and the environment in 2018. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been working as a sustainability consultant for a company called the Eastern Research Group. But 5 weeks ago, I actually quit and now work with an in-house sustainability team for Baker Hughes. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'll be speaking of my consulting experience. So as a consultant, I focused on life cycle assessment, which is more or less an accounting tool used to look at environmental and health impacts of products, processes, and other entities. So we look at the flows coming into a system, the flows going out of a system, and assign impacts to those flows. So this technique is really used to kind of debunk some of the claims that companies make nowadays about the circular economy. So in the current state, circularity only really applies to individual flows. So one company's waste stream, for example, is another company's input stream. Or as we're all really familiar with, one company's plastic waste is another company's input. And we see that on plastic bottles all the time when there's something like post-industrial recycled content or post-consumer recycled content. But the definition by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation assumes that a circular economy is good for the environment as a whole. LCA shows that that's not necessarily true. So it looks at individual impacts. Is it good for global warming? Is it good for eutrophication? Or is it good for water flows or something like that? And there's a dozen impacts that you can look up. And when you start looking at circularity claims, they really start to fall apart. So if we go back to plastics, for example, you see a lot of companies claiming that they now make their items out of 100% recycled PET or something like that. But there's no such thing as 100% recycled PET. All recycled plastics have virgin inputs. And that's kind of the role that LCA plays in the circular economy, which is not a great way to start this talk because it's really pessimistic, but I'm sure the next person is going to inspire us.
All right, Ben, you are now teed up to be very optimistic. Over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. And yeah, really excited to be here with you all. So my name is Ben Christensen. I'm the CEO and founder of Cambium Carbon. So I will do my best to be optimistic here as well. So I graduated from Cal Poly in 2018 with a bachelor's degree in environmental management, and then from the Yale School of the Environment this past spring in 2020 with a master's in environmental management there. During my time at Yale, my in-between summer, I was working at the World Resource Institute on federal carbon policy, and that's when I started Cambium Carbon, and I will talk about that origin story a little bit more later. But basically what we do is we create circular economies around urban wood waste in US cities. So we're trying to create a financially viable system to create circular economies in US cities that can really be catalytic to drive reforestation at scale. And we do that in a number of different ways. But to answer the question around, how does this really tie into the circular economy, and how do I feel about it? I mean, I think the key things that we focus on a lot are the opportunities to see intersectional collaboration with this. So we're a for-profit entity, a public benefit corporation that is really, really strong nonprofit partners. And we also are really focused on working with cities. So when I see, and I think that there's the opportunity within circularity and to grow into that space, it's about cross-sectional and intersector relationships that are really able to add more nuance to this definition. And then I think the second piece that we really focus on is people, and really being able to highlight, leverage, and work with folks in local communities to help prioritize and leverage their goals, and really understand that these systems can be super powerful in a whole number of levels if you can really help have a lot of people on board with that. So that's my work, and really excited to be sharing with you all today.
All right, Danielle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I am Danielle Azoulay. I am the Vice President of CSR and Sustainability at L'Oreal, leading the implementation of the program in the US market. I've been at L'Oreal working on consumer packaged goods now for about 4 years. And before that, I worked in the fashion industry. I started the sustainability program and managed the human rights program at Marc Jacobs. And then before that, I was at PVH. They're the holding company for Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, Speedo in North America. Prior to that, I did my master's at NYU in environmental conservation and education, where I really wanted to focus on C-suite level engagement or education around climate change risks to their business. And that program was great in that it was flexible enough for me to sort of create my own path. And before that, I came to sustainability from a very circuitous path. My undergraduate degree is actually a music degree, and I worked in the music industry for a number of years before deciding to go back to school and commit myself to the other passion I had, which was the environment and figuring out how to push the private sector to mitigate climate change. So that's my background. I will say, with the circular economy, I also teach circular economy for sustainability professionals as part of the sustainability management program at Columbia University. And I love teaching this class because it forces you to, and it forces my students to zoom way out and understand the systems that are in place that cause waste, that underutilize materials, and through different enablers, really rethink the entire system and identify where we want to be. And so, I tell people that I love garbage because any waste in a system is an opportunity to look at that system, analyze the system, and implement systems thinking, eco-design, materials innovation, alternative business models, and really dive deep into circular economy. I do have a couple of things that, Caitlin said, touched on a lot of really good points, but ultimately just want to call out that life cycle assessment is really not an accurate measure of circular economy. We don't have a way to accurately measure all of these big changes when they're interconnected in a system. If you're only looking at material flows, you're missing a lot of the opportunities that are inherent with circular economy or circular thinking. And so while material flows are a really important one and probably the most measurable, circular economy isn't limited to material flow. So looking forward to getting into it with you guys a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Danielle. And Asami.
Great. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with these amazing professionals. My name is Asami Tanimoto. I'm a community program manager at the Recycling Partnership. I have a bachelor's and master's degrees in chemical engineering from Tufts University and a master's in sustainability management from Columbia. I used to be an environmental consultant at CDM Smith, but really wanted to pivot my career to something that felt more impactful. And so that was why I did the SUMA program at Columbia. And during my time there, I found a way to turn every project, every internship, every fellowship into something about waste diversion, resource conservation, and about materials. So that led me to a position at the Recycling Partnership. And I manage grants to communities to improve their residential recycling programs, and I give them technical advice on planning and implementing those projects. But I also get to work on special projects like doing research on recycling programs on the West Coast and thinking about our best practices to nudge people's recycling behavior. As for the definition, we are really aligned with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We do see ourselves as lead action agent, catalyzing the circular economy in the U.S., while recycling really should be kind of the last resort. You know, when you look at Ellen MacArthur Foundation's butterfly diagram of how a material should flow in a circular economy, it's kind of on the, you know, at the very end. But it is a critical system for the reality that we are in at the moment. And by improving the recycling as a system, we are trying to make sure that the management of the material flow is effective. We look at, you know, policy to help eliminate barriers. We're a data-driven organization, so we try to leverage technology and data wherever we can. But we do more than just help improve recycling in cities. We are also leading the Plastics Pact for the U.S., along with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the World Wildlife Fund. And we have other coalitions and working groups that bring together stakeholders from the entire system to reduce the need for raw materials, to reuse and recycle where possible, and to eliminate problematic or unnecessary packaging. And we're supported by these organizations. And so we try to leverage that relationship. You know, we try to show them what can be recycled now, what needs work, and bring truth to what it takes to recycle something. It's really important to get that industry consensus on what types of packaging or products are going to have a viable life in the circular economy. And we do this while we, you know, also focus on the ground at the community level at improving infrastructure and communication. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Asami. I'm going to ask one question of all the panelists, and then Kathy and I have questions, individual questions for each of the panelists. So that'll be 5 questions in all, and we'll kind of give the audience a heads up when we're going to get a little bit closer to looking at the questions you're sending in through Q&A. But going in the same order. So Caitlin, I was going to ask you to answer this one first. Can you talk a little bit about whether your firm creates an inclusive culture through hiring strategies and workplace culture? And if so, can you describe some of the general ways this is evident and perhaps share a personal or observed example? And again, we're going to ask this of each of the panelists and have each of the panelists address this, starting with Caitlin.
Great. So I'm going to answer this in reverse. ERG was one of the most diverse workplaces I've ever worked in. As like an excessively privileged white woman, I was in the minority, and it was just a breath of fresh air. But this is hard to answer because it's very specific to ERG. But my consulting firm that predominantly worked with federal clients, the EPA, DOE, and OSHA, except for my group, which was the only one who took on private clients. And I bring this up because there is an affirmative action hiring scheme for government contractors that you must meet to be competitive. And if you exceed that, then you as a bidder on a contract are even more attractive to the government. So while it's nice to say that I worked in a very diverse workplace, there was an economic means to an end or a business case behind it. And that would be similar for consulting firms like ICF or Guidehouse, but not necessarily if you're going to go work for a consulting firm that just works with private clients.
Thanks, Caitlin. And Ben, same question.
For sure. Thank you. And I think it's a really, really important question. I think there's sort of 2 key things that come up for me when I think about leading and growing Cambium. So we are a young organization. So we started and were officially incorporated in March of this past year. So we're not a year old yet, but we've had a lot of traction. We're really scaling really quickly. We're working in a number of different cities and really growing really rapidly as a team. And so the key part there is we have this amazing opportunity as a young team to to really set the precedent on the front end. And that's something that we're really conscious and aware of. And we're about to enter our first like real large hiring cycle. And we're in the process of leveraging it and working with experts to help make sure that we're doing that in a way that really puts diversity and inclusivity at the front of that. And I think the second piece that really drives that home for me is just this culture of openness. One of the things that we really have, and this is the amazing thing about being part of an organization where we get to make every decision on our own. And one of the things that we realize is that every little decision when you're in the decision maker seat is actually a deeply moral and philosophical one. And you have to be really conscious about what are the bigger systemic issues that are driving your decisions and what makes that, decision actually come to light. And so we're really focused on understanding how do our decisions impact our team internally, how do they impact our partners in our cities, and then how do they impact these broader systems that we're hoping to address. So all in all, the key thing that we're really focused on is being really, really aware, being really vigilant internally about continuing to advance the work of anti-racism and really addressing these different components of that. And then also, as we move into this bigger hiring cycle, really leveraging and working with partners to help make sure that we really get that right from a DEI perspective.
All right, thanks, Ben. Danielle, just to repeat the question again before we, because it's been a bit, does your firm actively create an inclusive culture through hiring strategies and workplace culture? And if so, can you give some examples of some of the general ways this is evident, personal or observed examples? So up to you.
Sure. Yeah, also such an important topic to cover today. We have a head of diversity and inclusion for L'Oreal in the US and also at the global level and embedded in each market. And their remit is really to do exactly what you're saying, connect with our recruiting teams and make sure there's that two-way dialogue on how to continue to make our workplace as inclusive as possible. We have sort of the opposite problem that many other workplaces have, where they're typically you hear a lot about an inclusive workplace for women, and ultimately we have many more women, we skew much higher on the scale for women than men. And so we actually have to seek out and recruit men to work at our company. We are a manufacturing company at the end of the day. We are a research and innovation company. We are, up there as one of the best marketing companies. And so ultimately, and we don't only sell lipstick, we make a lot of products that men use also. And so just making sure that message is crystal clear. So because we ultimately believe a diversity of ideas makes us a stronger company overall. I'm lucky enough to sit on the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board, where we are bringing experts from all different diversity and inclusion segmented into our organization to tell us how do we get better, giving them that peek under the rug and really doing a deep dive analysis on really everything that we're doing, the policies that we have to ensure that ultimately everyone who works at L'Oreal feels like they belong. And that's the culture that we strive to create.
Thanks, Danielle. And Asami.
Yeah. So like Danielle was saying, we are also a very women-heavy organization, and we have a female CEO, but we're really actively working on this part of being more diverse. The reality was that we still are actually a very white organization. We've been hiring more people of color, but it's still only about 10% of our staff. But we've been making changes. Like we had an unconscious bias training last year. We also added a new core value to stand up and stand up and speak out for equity and inclusion. And we're looking at how we can integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion in our internal hiring and training, but also how we can integrate it into our work. We also often see people of color in labor positions in the recycling industry, but not in leadership roles. So we want to use, we established a recycling inclusion fund to establish a pipeline of leadership opportunities for people of color. And then also use that fund to help gaps through research and developing appropriate materials that we can use, we can bring to the communities that we're working with, because there's definitely some equity issues in the recycling world.
All right, thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Kathy to ask a few questions now.
Okay, so this has been great. You know, it's very evident just listening to all of you that I think we've done one of the things we wanted to do was to make sure we had a lot of scope and scale, you know, in terms of your work that you could, you know, bring to this conversation. I would welcome everyone, as you know, we have a couple specific questions for everyone, but if you want to take that time to add anything that you might have wish already, or if you want to you know, talk back to somebody because you know, we don't have the option of back and forth conversation. Please, you know, please do. I invite everybody to do that. And so, Caitlin, you know, tell us what you really feel. I loved your introduction, and I don't know if the question we have prepared, I mean, it doesn't really change because your role has changed recently, but if you could talk about some of the roles that you have been doing in when you were consulting in circular economy areas, doing LCA and other activities. And also, if you could maybe talk about a couple top firms that do specialize in circular economy consulting.
Sure. So consulting really touches all parts of the sustainability process within a company, or even nonprofits. That's nonprofit consulting is a thing too. And I was in a very specialized role, but if you're interested in like actuarial stuff, there are assurance partners for sustainability claims. There's the strategy side where you're helping companies get to net zero or get their SBTI or like TCFD certification. And those are all steps towards actually creating a circular economy. And then there's also like the stuff that I did, where you're going into a company and you're doing a very technical analysis or a very specialized presentation or something to that effect, where you are really the outside expertise. And that's predominantly the role that I played at ERG. But now at Baker Hughes, like I help procure consultants all the time to work on all parts of our sustainability work. And one of the great things about consulting is if you're new to this space, if you choose, you can really work as a generalist and touch all of these different parts depending on the contract or depending on the client that you're working on, or you can specialize in one technique. It's really up to you when you're searching in the job market. So some of the top consulting firms all work on this now. This is very trendy in corporate sustainability. It's very like loud and in your face, and everyone is talking about the circular economy. So you could go to PwC and work on this your entire career. You could go to KPMG and work on it your entire career. I know that my firm is currently hiring, or they were the last time I checked. So that's the Eastern Research Group. If you are interested in LCA, some other outlets that are working on this include Anthesis. They're a small consulting, not small, they're rapidly expanding consulting firm that's working on this, and they are actively hiring. They only work with private clients and you can just go to their job board to check. There's also a lot of consulting / think tanks. So there's one that comes to mind. It's called Metabolic. So they do both consulting work and thought production in this space, and like more academic studies than actual project work. So that's a very broad overview of sustainability consulting in the circular economy space, but it's truly, you could go into any of these firms and do either specialized roles, generalized roles. There's tons of work. I guess I should note, I changed jobs in the middle of the pandemic, and I had several offers that I was considering, and there's tons of interest in this space right now if you are graduating or have just graduated and are still looking.
Oh, Caitlin, thank you so much. That was a really good overview, and I think very helpful for people as they're thinking about circular economy is not like a monolith, but there's lots of different avenues, and also very positive to hear that you've had several offers just now and during the pandemic. I think everybody likes to hear that. Ben, I had a question for you, and again, just encourage you if you want to back up, add anything you left off, or respond to any of your comments here, please do so. You obviously you just graduated. You've built this company. Starting with it. So if you could give us the timeline of how that process went, and maybe include any kind of ideas you have for other anyone who's listening who might want to take on an entrepreneurial venture. So I think that's the question. Take it away, Ben.
Great. Thanks so much, Kathy, and I really appreciate that question. I think that there's a couple of different things that I want to touch on. So first, I would really encourage everyone to consider entrepreneurship. And I just want to be really clear that when I think about entrepreneurship, I think a lot more broadly than, Silicon Valley tech heavy startup. And there's definitely a lot of opportunities in that world and to really bring circular economy into that space. But I really think entrepreneurship can apply much more broadly. And for me, it really starts with listening really, really well, understanding what a real problem is, and then making the time to think and iteratively solve that problem. And that's something that we really try to do every day at Cambium Carbon. So this work for me started when I was at the World Resource Institute. I was working on federal carbon policy, was recognizing one of the biggest ways we can really store carbon for an extended period of time is through expanding tree cover. But in order to do that, you're going to need a number of different actors, and you're also going to need innovative financing. So coming out of a class from FES, Renewable Energy Project Finance, and really learning and taking those skills and applying and building a model, I was recognizing that there's this big gap between national level initiatives and all of this money in private, as well as the corporate, as well as the public sector coming in to support the climate space. But there's a gap between that and local, self-sustaining, financially viable projects. So that's where we started Cambium Carbon, to really bridge that gap. And for us, we're in a little bit of a different niche in the circular economy space. We focus on urban wood waste, which is something that doesn't get a ton of attention. So there's actually a really, really big problem around trees being wasted in US cities. So when that tree comes down outside your house, most likely that's ending up in a landfill or turned into a really low value product and not being captured and turned into its highest and best use. So we work with cities to create those enabling conditions, capture that wood, turn it into a higher value product, and then connect those revenues back into new trees, thus completing the circular economy. And that journey for me, sort of like I touched on at the front end, really started with listening really well. So being at the World Resource Institute, talking to experts, recognizing what is the gap here. The second thing that I think was really important, and I obviously encourage everyone to be really active, is to not be afraid to reach out to folks and really get their feedback on your ideas, whether that's somebody who you're looking for advice on in the entrepreneur space or otherwise. Really, I can't say enough for the value that we've seen from being able to reach out to folks, even if it feels like a stretch. The third thing that we've been able to really benefit from, so I started this idea, came back to Yale in my second year, was working on it as an independent study, so was able to make some time for that, was able to bring some other students on board, and then through really strong partnerships with the World Resource Institute and the Arbor Day Foundation, we won a $200,000 grant with the Nature Conservancy, which has then allowed us to grow and scale. So having strong partnerships has been a key part of that. Now we're in this phase where we're starting to really grow. We had 31 cities to apply to be a part of our first cohort, which is really, really exciting. And for me, shows the demand and the need for this, and shows that there's just such a need for circular economies in cities around urban wood waste. So we're working on executing now. So we're in our first 6 cities, really, really trying to drive that home. And the final thing that I think we're focused on now is growing and scaling. So we're in the process of raising our seed round. We're really, really looking to start bringing on a number of new folks and trying to build a climate super team that can help address these problems in cities as well as scale natural climate solutions more broadly. So if anyone is interested, I'm happy to chat. We're going to be hiring a good bit in the next couple months. And also if anyone has any questions about entrepreneurship, happy to field that as well. So thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And it's really great news to hear you're going to be hiring and all of your success to date. Jim?
Thanks, Kathy. And we're getting your questions coming in right now. We just have one question each we're going to ask of Danielle and Asami, and then we're going to move on to the questions that you are sending in right now. So thank you for sending those. Danielle, can you talk a little bit about the strides the health and beauty industry is taking in the circular economy, and maybe recommend some professional associations within the field that students consider joining or following so that they can start to be part of the conversation and know what's going on?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the second part of that question first. And, I think Asami and the organization that she works with, the US Plastics Pact, is a critical organization pushing this work forward. Oh, she works for the Recycling Partnership, but they're one of the orgs that are running the US Plastics Pact. If you at least want to do this work locally, we have critical infrastructure needs in the United States with regards to recycling. And while recycling isn't the circular economy, having an ability to properly manage waste and material flows to reintegrate them back into the system is a critical piece of a circular system. And so, some people may know statistics that in the US we're at like a less than 10% recycling rate, and things since COVID have gotten even worse, where cities are making tough decisions on where to allocate funding, and it's not to the recycling. Nor should it be, right? We have a critical health emergency on our hands, and that obviously has to take priority. But ultimately, we have to come up with other solutions quickly, because this isn't getting solved on its own. And that's why I love the US Plastics Pact really convening multi-stakeholder groups, cities, companies, material suppliers, people in all aspects, nonprofits, organizations in all aspects of the value chain coming together to align around a strategy, some goals, and a way forward. And so follow that work. I have really high hopes that we're going to change this system in a big way. As far as the beauty industry, in 2017, L'Oreal created a tool called SPOT. It's the Sustainable Product Optimization Tool. And each one of our products has to go through this tool. It's an eco-design tool, and basically quantifies the environmental impact for every decision that's made when we're making or renovating a product. We had a goal of setting 100% improvement on environmental and social factors for all of our products by the end of 2020. And I think we pretty much got there, got very close to that goal. And now we're figuring out, how do we take all this data that we've accumulated and externalize it, whether that be, we broke off the packaging module and created a multi-stakeholder group in Europe that's called SPICE. Forgive me, all of these acronyms in the sustainability space are catching up with me. It's the Sustainable Packaging something something. If you Google Spice and L'Oreal, you'll be able to find it. And that is really a multi-stakeholder group to align around packaging sustainability and how to quantify, what are the criteria that we measure and how to quantify that. And with Garnier, one of our leading brands, last summer in France, we piloted a transparency tool that's called the Product Impact Labeling System. And if you live in France and you go to Garnier, their website, you can find out information on a product by product basis, basically taking this data that we've collected through the Spot tool and externalizing that. That's just one example of an eco-design tool that we created that we hope has a positive impact across the personal care space. And I think there's this area is ripe for solutions. Conversations with retailers are really evolving in the past, I'll say, 3 to 5 years. And we're trying to also think about creating new materials, different materials, adapting the consumer experience, because ultimately, when you buy shampoo, when you buy conditioner, you're not buying it because of the packaging, you're buying it because of the formula. And so how do we get you that formula in a more efficient, a more effective, and a less impactful way?
Thanks, Danielle. And then Asami, there's lots of pathways into this kind of work. You have a very interesting pathway starting from a science-based technical background into a focus on community engagement. Can you talk about that a little bit and tell us how that came to be?
Yeah, sure. I don't think it's ever been one or the other for me. I would say that as an environmental consultant, my work was more technical usually than people facing, but I still engaged a lot with our clients. And so I always had a kind of a people interaction aspect of my job. Now I don't do much of the rigorous technical work of modeling and just being buried in spreadsheets all day, but I still help solve problems with our grantees, and so that's an aspect that really helps. That I can use my science background on. I get to do a lot more networking, which was something very new to me when this happened, and I'm not even sure if the person who hired me picked up on that as one of my strengths, but it just because I've never really advertised it, I guess. But it's always something I love doing. I love going to events and networking. So this was really a perfect opportunity for me to travel along the West Coast on behalf of the partnership, get our name out, connect with different communities, and then turn that into that relationship into put that into our pipeline of community projects. But being at a data-driven organization, we collect data from every grant project we have. So my technical background comes in really handy. Often we rely on consultants to help gather and analyze the project data, but I can have really good conversations with them and can think, critically about our work. And I'm increasingly getting involved in identifying our knowledge gaps, creating strategies on how to collect data through our community engagement team's work, and work with the data team so that our data can be turned into something useful to our other teams like policy, communications, and all the coalitions and the Plastics Pact. And then I mentioned earlier about doing some research work. in order to publish a report on research results, I really rely on my ability to analyze data and look at different data that we have. So I'm always tapping into my science background, and I do miss getting lost in spreadsheets sometimes, but I'm definitely not completely removed from it. And the Recycling Partnership, we've been around for 6-7 years now, but we're still growing. So there's still a lot of opportunities as long as I voice my interests. So there's a nice balance I could probably make with the technical work and the community engagement work.
All right, thanks, Asami. Kathy is now going to share a few of the questions that have been coming in through the audience. Fire away, Kathy.
Okay, so Asami, thank you for answering that question, and I think it's a great segue into one of the questions that has been presented. It's actually a two-part, and I'm just going to read it to everybody, and then whoever wants to answer, please jump in. But it's sort of building off what Asami was just talking about with the skills that she's developed, that some of her her innate ability of networking and her love of networking, and then the data work and strategic thinking, and then turning data into communication. So there was a lot covered there in terms of skills. So the question, as current students choosing curriculum and possibly a next degree program, what are some of the coursework recommendations for those of us looking to work in circular economy? So that was like sort of part one, coursework. And then part two, which types of skills should we be amplifying in our resumes to catch the attention of recruiters and hiring managers for circularity roles? And what I would suggest, since each one of you is doing very different kinds of work, that maybe you just focus on your own particular organization work that you do. So, what are some of the, good courses to students might want to be looking at to prep for the kind of work that you in particular do, and then what kind of skills would they writing on their resumes? Who would like to jump in? Anybody?
Yeah, I love this question because, it really forces me to sort of like reflect back on what are the classes I wish I took, and what are the things that I've learned on the job by doing it, and I would have potentially appreciated a more like formal classroom experience on some of these topics. But I think skills that I use every single day are change management. You would be surprised at how much psychology goes into sustainability. So understand principles of change management. And you have to know, if you want to work in-house at a company, a consumer products company, you really have to understand how products are made. So that means sourcing and supply chain. And if you can understand sourcing and supply chain, the accounting that goes along with that, the math that goes along with that, the decisions that our sourcing teams have to make, that's just going to make you a stronger sustainability and circular economy practitioner.
I can
Thank you. Yes,
jump in
Ben.
briefly.
Yeah, go ahead.
So briefly, from my perspective, I think there's a couple of things I would highlight. I think that in terms of the entrepreneurship space, when I'm hiring folks, I'm looking for folks who have really done a lot of work on themselves and are really quality, emotionally intelligent folks who are able to understand what their own limitations are and also what their strengths are. So I think there's a lot of coursework and different ways you can really engage and find that. And I really encourage that in everyone. And then I think the second piece is really, I look for folks who are really self-driven and have projects that they've built, created, and grown into. The other thing I would say a little bit more broadly that I really believe is, as he was touching on, there's a huge potential to leverage technical skills into all of these different roles and also to really leverage these intercommunication skills. So for me, negotiations, finance, and having some ability to understand sort of cash flows and project finance, I think opens up a lot of different doors. And then also sort of fundamental environmental science and life science background has been really catalytic. And the last thing I would say is I really think that hiring comes down to relationships in so many ways. And I actually think it's pretty easy to get somebody to feel like you're connected to them. And what I did when I was looking for roles before starting Cambium was reach out to somebody like 12 months before you think you might actually be talking to them and have several informational interviews over that time period. And by the time you reach a point where you're actually in your hiring cycle, you've already talked to them 3 or 4 times. And that's a warm contact. That's somebody who you've asked interesting questions of, who knows you, who knows your abilities. And so it's a little bit of a side to the question, but I think that's a really powerful tool that you can use if you're looking to find a spot.
Thank you for that, Ben. Caitlin.
Yes. So to echo what Ben said, I think what draws a lot of people to this space is that we have to straddle both the scientific and technical part of sustainability and the communications, more soft skills part. So really, if you're hardworking, you're smart, you're gonna do fine in this space. But that being said, I got my first job because I had taken a course on life cycle assessment while I was at Yale. And that's it, like straight up, I had the technical expertise to continue to work in that space. And on top of this, Amazon this year actually rolled out like a sustainability program that requires companies, if they're going to sell on their platform above a certain threshold, to do some kind of sustainability work, including life cycle assessment. So the demand for this skill has increased exponentially. There's tons of job descriptions out there right now. So if you are in your last semester and are looking for a hard skill that will probably get you a job, that definitely is it.
Yeah, I'd say,
Thank you.
Everyone's on point, and I think for me, it was like less about coursework, but really the relationships I built with the alumni, the students, and I got this position through a lecturer at Columbia who used to teach the circular economy course that I took. So, I think those relationships are really important. And for my job specifically, it's a lot about project management and also about being independent. We've always been remote, so it has nothing to do with COVID, but we all work remotely, so that's a skill that's really needed. But in terms of coursework, I'd say like the approach I took was, because I had the science and the engineering background, I was trying to fill in the other pieces that were missing. I went into the program thinking I was going to become a corporate sustainability manager. So then I was thinking, well, what other skills might I need for that? And finance was a big one that I was missing, and I was afraid of. I used to be afraid of looking at the financial reports, and even though I didn't end up exactly in that space, I get financial reports from my finance person every month as a project manager. So it's been really useful in that sense. So try to identify, the pieces that are missing, and select those courses.
Thank you so much, everyone. Jim, you want to jump in with a question?
Yeah, and we just have about 4 minutes now until we wrap up. And so I have an individual question that somebody has passed on for Danielle. Danielle, what was it like changing majors in career direction? What skills for people looking to make a similar change, what skills should they highlight to potential employers when they're making that change?
That is a really good question. I will say making the decision to change careers is scary, and it makes you question, all of your own skills and abilities, but ultimately, thinking sort of like outside of yourself and being able to understand how I did it was what am I passionate about, and I knew that I wanted to find a job that every day, I felt like I was going to work and living my values inside my office, not just in my home. And so that was really top priority for me. And a lot of times that kind of a passion really comes forward, in interviews and just it's who I am, right? So, some companies love it. I'm sure some don't. But also finding the right cultural fit where you can sort of ease in, start somewhere, and be able to learn as you grow. Because that's what I had. I had, bosses. My first boss really sort of saw the potential in me and gave me a shot and mentored me through my first job within this career. And then I was able to springboard from that and grow from there. And so, it's not an easy answer. If you're changing careers, it really is about relationships and building the relationships and getting to know someone who's willing to give you a shot. And I got very lucky in that sense. I also at the time was finishing up my master's. So, going back to Caitlin's point on hard skills, really, it was like the right place, the right time, but also the right skill set and for the right opportunity. Just have faith and be patient, and it will happen. And be nimble, right? If it doesn't happen in one direction, it could happen in another direction. So, it's definitely, I think, one of the scarier and more challenging things that I've done going from the music industry to sustainability and consumer products. But I also try and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Working in fashion for a number of years, I decided that I wanted to learn a different consumer product, a different supply chain, a different sector. And that's largely what drew me to L'Oreal. So yeah, I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is kind of one of my guiding principles in my career.
Thank you. I really like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable a lot. And I also like just your churning up lots of opportunities so that then you can decide what path to take. That's really excellent strategy. We need to wrap up now, just a couple of minutes left. I wanted to thank everybody who attended and sent in, as well as those people who sent in questions, the folks who attended the panel. Thank you for taking the time. I wanted to definitely thank our panelists. I mean, this is an issue I feel like you can talk about the circular economy, you can talk about working within the circular economy. Any of those conversations could be hours and hours long, and I thought you did an amazing job of keeping it succinct with lots of really good points for folks to be able to take away and take with them. So thank you very much, not only for participating, but doing such an awesome job on that. And then, of course, I wanted to thank all the schools who are part of the All Ivy Environmental and Sustainable Development Fair, my own career lab at Brown, the Yale School of the Environment, Yale Office of Career Strategies, and Yale School of Management, Princeton University Office of Career Services, University of Pennsylvania Career Services, Harvard Faculty of Arts and Sciences Career Services, Dartmouth Center for Professional Development and Thayer School of Engineering at Dartmouth, and Cornell Career Services. And of course, even when it was in person, but even more so right now, the Columbia University's Earth Institute, their entire staff, but especially Carrie, in my opinion, do an amazing, amazing job of making all of this happen. So thank you for being able to transition a great event to virtual. And again, thanks everybody for participating.